Singing is such a wonderful, powerful, soulful spiritual practice. And although we have a wonderful choir, all of us are part of a choir. And we need to lift our voice in song. And that happened yesterday all around the nation and all around the globe. And it was a part of that wonderful, soulful pilgrimage. I want to share a story that comes from the wisdom around the world, and it is a version adapted from Margaret Silk. Once upon a time, a pilgrim set out on a long journey in search of peace, joy, and love. The pilgrim walked for many miles, and time passed. Gradually, the young, lively steps became slower and more labored. The pilgrim's journey passed through landscapes that were not always happy ones, through war, through sickness. That was well-timed. Through quarrels and rejections and separations. A land where it seemed that the more people possessed, the more warlike they became. The more they had to defend, and the more they needed to attack each other. Longing for peace, they prepared for war. Longing for love, they surrounded themselves with walls of distrust and barriers of fear. Longing for life, they walked deeper towards death. But one morning, the pilgrim came upon a little cottage by the wayside, and something about that cottage called to the pilgrim. It was as though it was lit up from the inside. Full of curiosity, the pilgrim knocked and entered. And inside that cottage was a little shop, and behind the counter stood a shopkeeper. It was hard to judge the age and hard to say for sure whether the shopkeeper was a man or a woman. There was an air of timelessness about the space. "What would you like?" asked the shopkeeper in a kind voice. "What do you stock here?" asked the pilgrim. "Oh, we have all the things that you most long for," said the shopkeeper. "Just tell me what you desire." The pilgrim hardly knew where to begin. So many desires came rushing forth. "I want peace in my own family, in my native land, and around the whole world. And I want to make something good of my life. I want those who are sick to be well again, and all those who are lonely to be surrounded by friends. I want everyone on this earth to live in freedom, and I want this world to be a kingdom of love." The pilgrim paused as the pilgrim reviewed the shopping list. Gently, the shopkeeper broke in. "I'm sorry, I should have explained. We don't supply the fruits here. We only supply the seeds." As we stand at the beginning of a new year in January, and as we stand at the beginning of a new administration in this country, and often the administrations are 4 years long, I'm sitting with where we need to begin. And I think we really all need to grab hold of the nourishing and spiritual practices that allow us to be resilient and also to be clear-headed and love-filled as we walk through the landscapes of sorrow and destruction, and as we walk through landscapes of joy and reconciliation and hope. So at the beginning of this time, I want to invite you into a journey of spiritual practices, and I hope that you will keep up a spiritual practice for the next 30 days or perhaps the next 365 days. February is often known as a month where we lift up love. Let us begin by offering compassion for ourselves so that indeed we can turn and face the world with that same presence and compassion. And here at the fellowship, we have offerings that you might consider taking up this year. Perhaps you want to take up a daily practice of meditation or dream work or journaling or prayer as we started together today. Or maybe you want to cultivate a mind practice. You could join the Building Your Own Theology class that's starting and really delve into what are the values that nourish your religious understandings. What is it that you are moving towards? Or maybe you want to do a practice of Lectio Divina, which people often associate. You read a line of scripture from any of the world scriptures and then meditate on it for 20 minutes, for 10 minutes, for an hour, or for the day. What if you took Maya Angelou's poem that we shared this morning and read a stanza a day? You can do Lectio Divina with poetry as well. Or maybe this year you need to become more connected to your body and you could sign up for a yoga class. Or it might be the time to actually plant seeds in your own garden. Gardening is a wonderful way of reconnecting with the earth. Or maybe you'd like to have the opportunity to delve into a soul practice. A soul practice is one that helps us to exercise our creativity. Last year, our religious education director, Tim, started a pottery class. Maybe some of you want to get into pottery or sculpting. Or maybe there's a poet inside who longs to come out. There's a biblical expression that humans are made in the image of God, and perhaps that means we are made to create. There is the importance of communal worship practices like the time we spend together here in the sanctuary or the time the choir spends together on Tuesday night. Communal spiritual practices like walking together in Washington, D.C. And I would suggest that you consider finding someone in this room or in your family or a friend who can be a partner to hold you accountable to keeping up that spiritual practice, because we will really need to root ourselves in love and in compassion in these times. And sometimes it can be helpful to have someone that you can check in with on a daily or a weekly basis about how you're doing to keep that practice up. And then finally, as Unitarian Universalists, we believe in deeds, not creeds, and so hopefully you can include a spiritual practice that is justice-oriented, certainly this year. What would it look like every day to perform a deed of loving kindness, compassion, justice? That would be a wonderful 30-day, 365-day practice. And I want to share just a couple of examples of spiritual practices that I have witnessed that have absolutely lifted the spirits towards wholeness. I've been on a number of journeys in the last couple of years, and one of them was with immigrant women as we participated in a border action between El Paso and Juarez. Now, the women came from all over the country, and sadly, on the way back, 2 people were detained. Actually, a man and a woman were detained, and they were people of color. And none of the folks that were white were detained. Now, they happened to be citizens. And the young woman, one of the young women that was detained, the Immigration and Customs enforcement officers joked that she had the same name as someone else that had committed crimes, that it was either her or someone else, but that she was going to go to jail that day. And then they said, just kidding. Now, unfortunately, this was not the first time that this person had been detained, and she had been the victim of a really challenging experience. And she broke silence and shared that story with us when she was finally released that day. And we held in our hearts in a really powerful way all the reasons we were marching, the families that are separated because of deportations, and the abuses that happen sometimes to women and sometimes to Black and brown people when people in power misuse their power. And each one of us wrote on a ribbon the name of someone that we loved who was affected by these unjust policies, and an intention, just like we all did this morning. And we tied it onto the bridge in that liminal space between two countries. Not exactly Mexico, not exactly the United States. And each of us tied our ribbons, and they flapped in the breeze as our prayers rose up into the sky. And we continued the journey back to the United States and back to our homes, where we decided that we would make those intentions part of our daily lives. Or you and I participated in an incredible spiritual practice right after the terrible shootings in that school in Connecticut, when so many babies were killed. We participated by creating a work of art to carry to the vigil, and it said at the top of it, "I would rather lend a hand than hold a gun." And we walked into room 100, and handprints of so many sizes of children and adults forming a visual heart made out of hands with hands around it. And I want to share with you that about every third person would place a handprint and then tell me a story. One story is of a member who's well into his 80s right now, who at 6 years old was caught between a fight between two adults, and a bullet grazed his cheek. And others, too many others, shared the stories of episodes of gun violence where there was not a survivor. And then together, we marched with people from all of the houses of worship in this community and lifted up our intentions to work against violence and to commit to policies that end senseless gun violence. And finally, another example from my childhood. Many of you know that I was diagnosed with a terminal illness when I was a teenager, only I failed to terminate. I had a cancer for which there was no cure, and there was a part of the story that you may not know. My mother and a number of other mothers got to know each other quite well because their kids spent a lot of time in the hospital. I think my longest stay was about 40 days and 40 nights. And so at the end of the day, these 4 women, part of an interfaith circle, would go up to the rooftop at Hotel Memorial Sloan Kettering. And they would share a bottle of wine, and they would share the stories of their day, the hardships of their day. And before they went downstairs, they would utter aloud a prayer in all the languages of their hearts and their religious traditions, that they would have strength and that their children would have strength to face whatever would happen. Now, I don't believe prayer is magical in the sense that some people are chosen to survive and others are chosen not to survive. But I do believe that these practices do have the power to strengthen us and allow us to face things with the fullness of our heart. And so these mothers at the end of that ritual would return to the demons and to their daughters and sons and to whatever faced them. And all four of us, by coincidence, are actually still alive. And I always think about that prayer circle. And it reminds me of the importance of having a holy center come what may. A holy, healing center so that we could figure out which is the direction forward towards life, towards love, towards wholeness. So yes, this year, this day, may each one of you start a practice or continue a practice that nourishes you and renews your spirit for the communion of struggle that awaits us this day. And may our words, the words of our heart, rise up, and may our footsteps and the actions of our lives follow to make them more than words, to make them visible differences in the world we live in. May it be so. Will you join with me in our closing song, number 1060?